You? Sinead?
On the council's website within 24 hours. And would members and officers please remember to switch microphones on when they're speaking and speak directly into the microphones, and switch them off when they've finished. And I'll try and remember as well, because I'm not very good at doing that. Any exempt private items on the agenda, the live stream will stop. I don't think we have any of those tonight, do we?
We haven't.
No, so we don't have any of those. Reporting officers using Teams, we're asking that you use the hands up icon on your screen for questions and comments, and turn off the camera and the microphone on, turn on your camera and turn the microphone on when speaking and off when finished. And please make sure that you put your mobile phones onto silent mode, or preferably switch them off. Okay, so we just move on from there. First of all, Eunice, any apologies, please?
Yes, Chair. Apologies received from Councillors Basit Mahmood. We have Councillor Mahmood Hussein subbing for him. Apologies has also been received from Councillor Fry and Councillor Abbas, with Councillor Alia Khan subbing for Councillor Abbas, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Okay, so want to move on to minutes now? Okay, can we first consider the minutes from the 20th of November? Those have been circulated in your papers. Does everybody accept those minutes, please? Can I also just make a comment here, if I may, Eunice, which is that the group leaders have agreed that in minutes from now onwards, more or less, that when members make comments or ask questions, that they should be named in the minutes, just so that you're aware.
Sorry, Chair, they should be named.
They should be named, rather than saying a member said. The group leaders, all three, have agreed that the name of the member asking the question or making the comment should be named in the minutes. So it was just as a reminder from recently. Right. My update next, Chair's updates and announcements. We discussed previously that the process of us looking at and commenting on and reviewing the corporate performance report, that we would try and change the procedure so that we could try and get a higher proportion of answers at the OSB. Yes, Councillor.
Oh, sorry, you moved on. You didn't ask when we accepted whether there was any comment on the minute. I don't know if you're coming back to it.
I'm sorry, I thought I didn't see any hands come up. So
No, sorry.
go
it was
back
only-
to
it
the
was only
back to the minutes.
It was just it was a kind of a spelling mistake, which was on page 9, and it says need to do more and fine more ways of supporting, and I think it should be fined. Although I don't think we want to fine people. I'm sorry, that was
Have in mind two
I probably
people.
nitpicking, but it was an embarrassing.
The
No,
comments
sorry,
or queries, or are we happy with those minutes? Okay, going back then to that announcement, we had been discussing ways in which, with the corporate performance report, we could find a way of ensuring that this group got more answers during the course of the meeting than was previously possible, and that we would therefore have other officers available, and we recognise what an issue that was. We will later, when we come to that item, get an update from Sally Cartwright on what she believes is possible for us to understand what she thinks might be possible, for us to make any comment, get any discussions, and get to a final point. I'll leave any other comments, I think, until we reach that stage in the meeting. So back to our normal agenda then. Disclosures of interests, Eunice?
Come to. Oh, hang on, what's the item?
Item 6.
Item 6.
Yeah, it's the first main agenda item. Is it item number
6.
Item number 6.
Yes. I suggest that if the meeting is in agreement, since there are two people involved in having to declare interests on that, I'm proposing, if you're in agreement, that we move that item to the very end of this meeting tonight, so that, and we put it after the work programme, so that way round, when the two of you have to leave the chamber, you actually can disappear rather than having to go out immediately and then come back in again after a wait. Is that acceptable?
Very kind of you, Chair. Oh,
Is that acceptable, Councillor Riles?
Oh, yes, sorry. Yes, that's fine, thank you.
Yes, Councillor.
It is customary, in fact, I think it's included in standing orders, that when a member declares an interest, they give a very brief explanation of the reason for needing to do so.
So over to you again then.
yes, I checked with Mark Turner, and because there are some financial implications that have come back as part of the motion from the part of the discussion of that previous item, but there were financial implications because I live in the ward and Councillor Isles as well, that Mark Turner felt that it was right that we should declare an interest.
Right.
No urgent business, Chair.
Okay. would like us to move, please, to, as we're deferring item 6, I would like us then to move now to item 7 on our papers. That starts on page 26 of your paperwork. See, we have Sally moving in. Welcome, Sally. Thank you. Who's got to do that?
Aurora.
Aurora, can we have the PowerPoint on the screen, please?
Of course, just bear with me a moment.
Thank you. So I'm just going to introduce, as mentioned, just a proposal of a change in process for this, just to try and make it work better to answer some of the queries. So I'll hand back over to Aurora shortly to go through the actual report as usual, but just wanted to take a moment just to talk about proposed change. So we've just put it onto this slide. I don't know if you want to do it full slide show, Aurora, just so it's slightly bigger. Thank you. So essentially, prior to coming to this point, there's a process that needs to happen in terms of getting the report ready to come here. So a quarter ends and there's some data and analysis that's needed, and working with service managers and directors to fill in the commentary of what's happened over the last quarter. So we need time to do that and go around to the DMTs and have those discussions, and then it goes to CLMT and there's some further tweaks. And at the end of that point, it comes to the Democratic team here to come out to this meeting. So what we're proposing is just to truncate that process a little bit more so that it can come here, to Eunice and the team, about 2 weeks earlier than usual. It will then get circulated. The chair will have an initial look, and then it will get circulated to the board with an opportunity to come back with any queries and questions. So there is an ask of an earlier review of the report from the board. So to come back with any queries and questions that are about the actual service delivery and why the data is saying what it's saying, rather than queries on the actual data, which Aurora won't have the answers to, as we've seen probably in other meetings. So that will allow coordination then to the services that the data, that the queries and questions are related to go back out to the services to get a response and ask for them to attend the OSB. So that process will take 2 weeks. And then once that's happened, then the papers will go out as usual for this meeting. So just this paper will come out 2 weeks before the rest of the papers, an opportunity to ask questions and queries to the team, and any minor tweaks that might be needed before the papers come out formally as part of the papers for this board.
This is more or less what we suggested as a way. I mean, the report contains very important information, and it never gets the kind of attention that it deserves, simply for the reasons outlined. So I would suggest that we agree to this. The only caveat I want to add is its success will depend on the Democratic Services team reminding us when they send it out that written questions are required in advance of the meeting.
Yes, I understand that, Chair. Once we have received that report from Public Health, we will be happy to just push that forward to members and request for responses back as soon as possible.
Thank you. Councillor Stevens.
This particular meeting by highlighting the areas I was going to ask questions on. But going forward, I mean, it seems like a good idea, but the only point I would make is that there could be supplementary questions that come up and that are considered after, so that they will always have to be answered, raised within this meeting. It can't always be confirmed that they will be done in advance. That's not democratic.
No, I think normally the response will be that service director then attends OSB, but we'll have prior notice that there will be some questions on their specific areas, so to come to this meeting. I don't think, I can't envisage that it will normally be that they'll just write a written response unless it's something very minor. So I think an ask for them to attend would normally be the best approach.
Yeah, that's fine.
Questions or queries, or are we happy with the proposal that Sally has put forward for a different method of approaching this report? Yeah, everybody happy? Okay, so thank you, Sally. It looks like you found a way through, and that's very commendable because that was a tricky one. But thank you.
Well, let's hope it works better next time and we can review it. We can keep it under review. Yeah, so Aurora's online, so we'll go through the report now.
So performance in Q2 remained strong, with 39 measures showing as green, 11 measures are amber and 13 are red. Beginning with the reds, the percentage of influenceable council spend through procurement with local suppliers, the Q2 figure is 42.4%, which is short of the target, which is 60%. Procurement is proactively working with the data analytics firm and economic growth and skills to identify more local suppliers to engage with. The number of cases prevented from becoming homeless figure of 81 is within target. However, the year-to-date figure of 129 is not on track to meet the annual target. The number of affordable homes started on site, Q2 figure of 0 is lower than the quarterly target, which is 12. The number of newly approved foster carers figure is 1, creating a year-to-date total of 8, which is not currently on track to meet the annual target of 25. Timeliness of council tax reduction new claims Q2 figure of 31.87 is not on target, which is 25. Performance has been improving in this area since the start of the year, with added resources in the form of external agency workers supporting the FTE within the service area. A current review of the resources within the service is being undertaken. The town centre footfall Q2 figure of 1.84 is below the quarterly target of 3.53. The unemployment rate rose by 0.1% from Q1 to Q2. The number of children subject of a child protection plan Q2 figure of 249 is above the quarterly target, which is 200. The unemployment claimant count, 5.8%, is an increase from the previous reporting period and is higher than the previous year-end figure, which indicates poor performance. The percentage of education, health and care plans issued within 20 weeks, excluding exceptions, figure is 29%, which is below the target of 90%. In order to develop high-quality EHC plans that coordinate and integrate provision across services, it is essential that the EHCNA is informed by high-quality statutory advice. This continues to be an increasing challenge from all external services as well as internal, such as educational psychology, who are being equally affected by the increase in demand. This has impacted the service's ability to produce plans within the 20-week timescale when advice cannot be obtained in a timely manner. The team are working with colleagues in system developments to report accurately on delays caused by these factors. This will provide a clearer picture in how the team can overcome the challenges. Moving on to the greens, the Q2 airport passenger numbers for this year is 4.80, which is above the quarterly target. Adult social care financial assessments Debt recovery Q2 figure is on target, and timeliness to process charges. The Q2 figure of 8.65 is within target levels. The number of homeless relief is on track to meet the annual target of 241, with 102 in Q2. The number of homeless households allocated a permanent offer through the housing register Q2 figure of 55 is above the quarterly target of 53. Antisocial behaviour cases relative to the size of landlord Q2 figure of 3.9 is lower than the quarterly target of 14.4, which indicates good performance. Complaints relative to the size of the landlord stage 1 and stage 2 are both lower than the quarterly target, which indicates good performance. The timeliness of benefits new claims 22.14 and changes 9.37 are both within target levels. The number of affordable new homes completed Q2 figure of 46 is above the quarterly target of 25. Council tax billing percentage of work outstanding over 15 days, Q2 figure of 16% is on target. Number supported or amount awarded with discretionary housing payments is within target levels. Statutory compliance completed for both housing and corporate are all on target. The percentage of attendance in state-funded primary and secondary schools are both on target, with 93.5% for primary and 91.7% for secondary. The percentage of children attending good and outstanding primary, secondary, and special schools are all on target. The percentage of children looked after attending good and outstanding schools is 95%, which is within target. The amount of council tax collected, figure of 54.6 or 66.9, is within target. Total business rates due and total business rates collected is also within target. Timeliness of council tax reduction changes, the figure is 7.21, which is on target. The amount awarded with household support grant is within target levels. ASCOF adults in contact with secondary mental health services who are in employment, Q2 figure of 15% is above the quarterly target, which is 10%. Employment in Luton number of jobs labour force survey includes self-employed increased in Q1, increase between Q1 and Q2. Number of apprenticeship starts rose from 6 in Q1 to 28 in Q2. If this rate of increase continues, then the year-end figure will meet the target of 5% increase from the previous year. Thank you. Are there any questions?
Okay. Where do we start? Kant?
I've got 6 questions. Do you want me to do them one at a time, or do one and then other people come in? And
I think we'll go through your list of questions and let's see how we get on.
okay.
If I need to, then we'll stop in your list and move on to somebody else's. Let's see how we go.
Okay. My first thing is a comment, which is generally congratulations to everybody, because the results overall are good, and some of the things that were on the negative side, it was pleasing to see that they've moved into the positive side this time. So I'd like just to make that comment, if I may. And then the others aren't really negatives, but more about exploring why things are in a particular position. If I could start with, and I see Colin Moon's here, so that the two relating to housing, if I may.
Sorry, Councillor, can you refer us to the page in the
My
papers
apologies.
help
So
people,
page
please?
37, firstly, and it's a number of cases prevented from becoming homeless and homelessness acceptances. I understand that a large contributing factor to the underperformance, and I think it was an annual underperformance, is the big difference offered in housing. Is the big difference offered in housing benefit compared to the market retail rent required by landlords. I don't quite understand that. It seems that the housing team often offer to pay the difference, which is a good thing. But I'm not quite sure. Maybe Colin Moon could tell us on what basis this happens. What kind of budget is available to step in and to pay this difference so that the landlord may be willing to make the offer. And finally, is there anything that we could do? Because obviously it seems to be up to the whims of the landlord, even if we are stepping in to pay the money, that they still seem to sometimes not be willing to take the homeless person into the accommodation. So those are the questions on that for me.
Thank you, Councillor. So, excuse my voice, I've got a little bit of a cold. So this is generally around prevention and the measures we use. We use various measures. One of those measures you mentioned, sometimes paying off household arrears, and sometimes paying the gap between the local housing allowance and the rent, essentially. So but that's not the only way we prevent homelessness, generally speaking. We can prevent homelessness in lots of ways. If someone comes to us with a Section 21, that's not in the prescribed format, we'll give them advice, we'll speak to the landlord, and that's a homeless prevented because they can't go to court with a notice after the notice expires because it's not in the prescribed format. So they have to do it again. That's another month before they can go to court to apply for a notice. So it really does, it depends. At the moment, rents are quite high in Luton. So where the landlord's asking for more money or trying to raise the rent, we will try to negotiate with the landlord as best as possible. And we will try to find a way of paying the difference. The problem with that is it can only be for a year or 2 years, and then that runs out again, and then we're in the same position again. So we want to try to make that more sustainable. Usually, we'll try to get the household to move to another property that's more suited to the needs, or the rent is more reasonable. And when we're talking about money, usually we get a homeless grant from government, usually around 3 million, just depends. All the money put together can be a lot of money. There's also something called discretionary housing payments that they can get through DWP. For us we actually administer it to top people's payments up, if you like. So there are various different ways that we prevent homelessness. The targets are, I'm not going to say they're arbitrary targets, but sort of based on what happened the previous year. And what you also have to appreciate, and we've written that in the response, Councillor, because there was a response in writing to your question. Prevention is not just prevention. The relief stage that people go into after the 56-day prevention period is also a prevention period. So they got two essentially bites of the cherry for us to prevent them from being homeless. But usually when they move into the relief stage, sometimes they're in temporary accommodation and prevention can't happen. So all I'm saying is there are various different tools we use to prevent homelessness. Sometimes it could just be a case of just advising the landlord or the tenant appropriately, and that's it really. It really isn't nothing majorly scientific. The bog standard way of preventing homelessness is just saying to the landlord, can you please keep this person on for a little while longer? If they got arrears, we will think about paying off the arrears. If there's a gap in the rent, we'll think about paying the gap in the rent, but we don't just automatically do that stuff. We've got to look at value for money, etc., etc. So that's the first one, Council. What was the other one, please?
My next question, Colin, if I may, it's the number of affordable homes started on and being made available is well under target, as I understand it. Luton Borough Council has a target of 20% of new homes being affordable. Currently, the majority of homes in the town being built are 1 and 2 bedroom flats. So my question here, is there anything in our planning regs that we might be used to require the private schemes, private builders to also offer 20%, or can we negotiate with them to try to bring that about?
Thank you, Councillor. Mike. A lot clear here who's the actual expert in housing on development. But generally, first of all, we are going to be bringing in new local plans soon. Those discussions are carrying on at the moment. I'm not sure how far they're off. Is that now 2 years or so, roughly? Yeah. Our affordable target is 20%. The main problem developers are having is viability. Land costs in the borough are pretty high. So usually when they put a scheme together and they come to us and we say we need an affordable element of 20%, and they say, well, actually, we can't afford to build this development anymore because 20% will totally pitch our costs over the threshold, we sometimes have to compromise. And if we refuse planning permission, they can go to the inspectorate and usually get the decision overturned. So it's not through want of trying that we're trying to bring in affordable housing through the planning system. But probably a couple of years ago, we only brought in 3% affordable housing through the planning system, and that's not obviously helping our housing situation in Luton. So obviously the planning officers and committee have got their job to do. All they can do is make decisions about compliance schemes that are put in front of them. And if a developer decides to go to inspectorate because they haven't got the decision they want, sometimes they get overturned. We are doing all sorts of things in the borough in housing anyway to try to influence this. We've now got a new developers forum that happens every quarter, where developers and other providers like housing associations come to, so we can have a conversation with them about what they're planning to do in the borough. And we regularly meet housing associations and providers about, the fact that we want them to do more in the borough. Hightown probably are the only housing association who are doing a little bit of work in Luton, and they're bringing another large scheme hopefully in a couple of years soon. So it's not through want of trying. We spoke to BPHA's chief executive this morning to talk to him about their plans. But we do have a big problem with viability in the borough. But I'll keep saying to people that London's sorted that out, so I'm not sure why we can't. But it's a struggle. And with 11,000 on the housing register, we need to get accommodation built in Luton, as best we can, as quickly as we can. So that's the general thing around. I'm not planning. I'm not going to suggest that planning aren't doing the best to bring in affordable housing in the borough. It's more about the developers and some of those private institutions who want to build in Luton for not for the housing needs of the borough, but for their own gain and to make as much money as they possibly can, which is it's a business at the end of the day.
Can I just maybe add into that, Colin, if I may, and ask the question whether the figures in respect of affordable housing are lower than they might have been because of the 2 stalled builds by Vauxhall Homes. Is that still an element?
Yeah, so those schemes have started. Taylor Street and Strangers Way have stalled because developers went into liquidation. I was actually in the meeting today around Taylor Street. We're looking to cement a deal with Building Technical Services to build out that scheme. They're currently doing weatherproofing work to Taylor Street and to Strangers Way. And Strangers Way is out to the market to get another developer. So we will be starting, particularly on Taylor Street, in a reasonably near future. I think I've got an email to send you, send someone about that. And Strangers Way is only a little bit more complicated because we've had to go back out to the market to get another contractor. Building Technical Services, or BTS, have currently got on site, Buckle Close and Freeman's Green, and we'll be doing a few other small sites. So when they take on Taylor Street, it's going to stretch their resources, but they can do it and they will do it. And obviously it's in the council's interest, not only Foxhall Homes' interest, for that scheme to be built out, because it's been empty, it's been vacant for about 6 months now, that site, and because of the weather, it's taken a little bit of weather damage, but it's now water and rain and weather type, proof type, yeah.
My next question, please, is on page 40, and that is on the area of proportion of registered care services, good or outstanding. Obviously, very good results, but I do have a question in that two providers obtained adverse ratings from the CQC, and another is under a warning notice. I'd like to know why these weren't picked up as a red light prior to the CQC coming in to do the inspection. There must be ways. Our own teams must be going into the centres and to monitor what's going on. So why it's a bit unfortunate that it was picked up in the inspections by the CQC. And could we not have gone in and made the necessary improvements prior to the inspections?
So I can try and bridge some of the answer to this, but obviously I'm not the Director of Adult Social Services, so I can't answer fully. But what I do know is that things won't always be picked up before an inspection. So we will have a series of quality visits. There will be eyes and ears that will be reporting things in as seen back into the team to trigger quality inspections. There'll be a process, but the sequencing won't always be that things will be picked up before a CQC visit. So I think, I don't know the details of this case, and it sounds like it's unfortunate that it wasn't picked up prior, but I can ask for more feedback from Jill Britton on this specific situation.
Before I continue with Councillor Stevens, anybody else is wanting and queuing up to wait to ask questions? In which case, carry on, sir.
Okay, my next question is page 44, smoking prevalence. And the question is selling vapes to under 18s is illegal. According to ASH, however, 20.5% of children aged between 11 and 17 have tried vaping. What is the percentage in Luton? And what actions are being specifically taken to ensure that vapes are not being sold to under 18s? And how is tobacco control strategy attempting to limit or stop vaping amongst the under 18s within Luton?
Thank you. So we have a comprehensive tobacco control strategy that does include work on vaping. Particularly, there's a couple of strands on the vaping piece, vaping area that the tobacco strategy picks up. One of them is around tackling illegal vapes and shisha and illegal products, led by the licensing team, trading standards, but linked into our tobacco control strategy. So that's one element of the vaping piece of work that's picked up. And then the other bit is around prevention and working in schools. So we do work with schools around vaping harms. We've done a campaign recently. We've gone out to schools and had discussions with teachers on vaping and the harms of vaping. So there's a couple of ways in which we're trying to tackle that, but it's very much a core part of our tobacco control strategy.
Can we get some further report back on that, please?
Yes, actually just in Health and Wellbeing Board last month, we had a whole report on vaping and what we're doing around vaping and the illegal tobacco, so we can I can circulate that report, but we can also bring something back specifically to this meeting.
More. Okay. I'm going to dive in just for a minute and just ask a couple of questions which have cropped up for myself, and I'm going to cheat and use chair's privilege to do that. If I look at page 34, the item number is 13. There have recently been reports in the national media about the poor performance in terms of children attending schools. This is a very pleasant statement for me to see here from Luton. What is it we're doing that means we get a better school attendance than a lot of other local authorities? I'm just curious to know.
I'll pick that one up. I'm Paul Wagstaff, Director of Education. I think the issue is that we work quite closely as a partnership and a community. So our schools work very closely with their parent community, and we have a wraparound system, including our attendance officers and also our family partnership service. So my belief would be that working with the partners and with the community works extremely well in actually making sure that attendance is top notch as far as it can. And certainly, as you're right to point out, our attendance figures at school are strong and stronger than you would see nationally.
I have to say I was delighted to read that in the report. I hadn't expected that to be the case, so I was delighted. My next question really is, I think, coming back again to Colin. It's on page 39. There is a mention here of nettings achieved and the supply. Are the figures that we're seeing here including any families and so on that have been moved into the accommodation that's been opened up on Eaton Green Road, or have we not come to those figures yet?
Thanks, Councillor. We started to put people back into Eaton Green. I think the first was a Friday, the week after that. So we've been putting people back into Eaton Green first week of December. And as at last week, we had about 60 odd households in Eaton Green, and it's got a capacity of about 84 households. It's 96 rooms, but it just depends how we use the rooms, in what configuration. So the only units really down there that we haven't utilised yet were the single units, because we've still got an issue around how many singles we should put in a particular block, and the nature of those singles. We've still got an issue. So yeah, so these figures, the figures that you're referring to, are Q2 figures, and don't refer to Eaton Green, because we only started to put them in at the end of Q3.
Thank you. I have one more, and then we can go back over to other people. On page 47, the third item down is talking about unemployment. What is there any background behind why it seems from this report that unemployment in Luton has been going up? Is there a particular reason for it?
I think and again, not my complete area, but I think it's one of those ones that is a complex picture, that it won't be one reason, but there are lots of plans around it. So there's an employment and skills strategy that's looking to address various factors around employment. So looking at learning, looking at back into work schemes, looking at those that are furthest away from employment and supporting them back into work. And then there'll be elements around aspirations for young people and education. So I don't have all the answers, and I don't know what the specific reason is for that, but obviously we know that there are various political factors as well that will be driving that nationally. So again, can ask for further updates from sorry, Sinead, you're here. Great. Sinead, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Sally. You've done a good job at summarising it. That around what we do in adult learning is critical. Obviously, there is a 0.1% increase. There isn't anything significant in terms of what we're hearing, but we are doing lots of work on the ground. So members will shortly be made aware of the work we're doing around 5 pilot areas for a career and jobs fair. So that's doing some very targeted work out in our wards. The idea is that we learn from those 5 and then roll those out across the rest of the other 15. We can bring back the learning to OSB so you can hear about sort of what come out of those sessions. We want to be able for it to feel where people feel comfortable coming into that space. They're spaces with book that people are used to engaging in the community. We're doing lots of work with employers, so having a mix of jobs available. Also some work around on the job offers, so having Lidl and Ocado and people like that there as well. We want to do lots of work around reskilling opportunities as well. So we've got lots of money in the budget around passport to employment, some funding through UKSPF and the multiply funding. So doing some very targeted and bespoke work around how we support our local people to either get a job or a better paid job. So there's a significant amount of work happening. We will also refresh the employment and skills strategy year 3. And as far as I know, at the next OSB, you will get a report on year 2, and we can do some more of the detail around that question, Councillor Wynne, if that works for you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the input. I do have to say that there were 1 or 2 items in this report which, on the whole, I found very informative. 1 or 2 items that surprised me, but I'll come back onto those as comments later. I get to go back again to members of OSB and questions you might wish to ask.
I just have one question about the EHCP plans. So with your EHCP plans, there seems to be quite a big jump between last year and this year's Q1 and Q2 figures. Why is there such a big jump, and can we expect them to come down?
In relation to the number of requests coming through for an EHCP plan, they are increasing, and they've been incrementally increasing over time. But certainly since the COVID pandemic, there's been a significant surge in demand coming through, which has put pressure on the system. I think we are seeing that trend nationally. And so there's an annual increase of around 7% in requests coming through nationally. And we're in line with that. So we will be expecting these to continue to grow. What we are quite committed to is to making sure that we get the right provision in the right place for children. And it may very well be that we can do that without the need for an EHCP. And it's actually how we work with our schools to deliver that. The timeliness of EHCPs is obviously something that's within the report. And although we've below our target, Q2's figures indicate where we are, but it's certainly increasing since that time, and we are moving forward. And actually, potentially around 70% of our children's EHCPs are completed between 1 to 25 weeks. The measure is 1 to 20 weeks, but the additional 5, days, no, 5 weeks, the additional 5 weeks, and we're almost getting the rest, up to 70% completed. But I think with increasing pressure, that challenge will always be there because the capacity is what it is. But we are trying to find different ways to try and make sure that children's needs are met before they need to get through into an EHCP.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My next one is on page 68, which is children attending good and outstanding schools. First is the comment. It's certainly excellent to see that the percentage of children attending our special schools, it's 100%. And I think we should be a beacon to other authorities around the country that we're able to achieve those levels. And I wonder if we're going to do something about it. We should be we should be sending out our messages about things that we're doing really well, certainly on that point. It's also pleasing to see that there is improvement in our primary and secondary school percentages. The one thing I would like to ask, however, is that we are below the national average. I think that it's about 95%, I think, in the national average. And are we doing anything? Is our aim to try to at least get to the national average, or maybe even, as with the special schools, go above it? So I wondered what strategies might be in place to try to improve on the great improvement we've already achieved.
Thank you very much. In response to that, certainly we're really pleased with the number of children who do attend our good and outstanding schools, and it's important for the council to note that all of the schools that are maintained directly by the local authority, that's our maintained schools that are not academies, they are all outstanding or good. None of our schools are less than good. And we have a small number of academies that are still requiring improvement, but in terms of the local authority's perspective, our schools have improved. So in relation to the number of children attending good or outstanding schools, a lot of that relies on when an inspection comes round, and we're not in control of when the inspection comes. So although there are some academies that are judged to be requiring improvement, that was at their last inspection. It may very well be that their provision is good now, but we're awaiting Ofsted to come back and change that. In relation to the number of children attending good or outstanding schools, it is above average. I think the national average is around 89%, I think. And certainly, and looking at the number of schools that we have in Luton that are good or outstanding, we are well above the average, national average. And actually, we are second to Southend on Sea across all of the Eastern region local authorities. So we're at the very top end of this, but our special schools we're particularly proud of, and the provision that our special schools offer our children who are our most vulnerable in society, and my hat does go out to them. And it's certainly, I do agree, we do promote and support them in actually getting that message out, and our special schools do provide outreach work into other schools to help them improve as well. But I do thank you for the comments there, but we are continuing to work with our schools and our academies to make sure that all of our children are attending the provision that they're entitled to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My last question, you'll be pleased to note, it's to do with the town centre vibrancy. I mean, the general trend of residents and visitors visiting the town centre shows a decline. I am aware that we have received, I think, £2 million of UK SPF funding to improve this town centre. I know, for example, in my own ward, that many elderly are not keen on coming to the town centre for a number of reasons. One of those, actually, I'm hoping that we will address as a council, full council, which is to do with the bikes that are speeding through the town, and the scooters that are going through the town. Also about the gangs are often milling around the town. But I wonder, maybe looking even at what's happened in other parts of the country where they've built up the vibrancy of the town centre. Are there any inspirational plans in place to try to improve the town centre so more people will visit, more visitors from outside of the town will visit? I see that Sinead McNamara is there. So are there some really inspirational plans that we have in mind to try to buck this trend and to get back on having high footfall in the town?
In answer, yes. We have
Good.
lots of things planned for the town centre. We're going to have a new visitor economy strategy, which will be focused particularly on the town centre, which won't just be about visitors coming in, it will be about residents as well. But it will also pick up our nighttime economy, which we know is a challenge for us, and that's very much focused on the town centre. You are right, there is a significant amount of UKSPF allocated next year for the town centre. It's not 2 million, but it's probably closer to £1 million, but that will do a number of initiatives, some which are around public art, some which are around doing things in our empty shops, some around lighting, some around the general look and feel. There is also the public realm strategy, which is being produced, and the design guide. And from there'll be some very clear recommendations about what we do and how we implement that in our town centre. And I understand that will come to OSB. Some other key things that are happening this year, we've got the Wild in Art Trail in 2024. We've got a big programme of activity at Hat Gardens again. There's lots of work with the university around the street, addressing the street activities programme, and that's very much around how we tie in the work around antisocial behaviour. So making sure that we pull all the levers at once. So we are trying to tackle antisocial behaviour, begging, etc., but also putting in ways to attract people back into our town centre. So there's no point in us trying to address all the antisocial behaviour, but actually visitors still don't want to come into our town centre, or residents, should I say. So it's about having that wider strategic plan about how we really try to bring it all together. There will be a detailed town centre plan, which is really the next steps from the town centre master plan. So that will pick up everything from the town centre regeneration piece, down to the town centre activation, down to antisocial behaviour in the PSPO. And what you'll be able to see is that how all the plan comes together with our partners, the bid, the football club, the university, the MAL, etc. And what I was going to propose is that when we've got a clearer plan, and we would of course consult with OSB, is that I get a session in through the chair and with Eunice about getting it on the work programme, so you can have a really deep dive, I guess, into the town centre plans and be part of shaping that, if that sounds like it would be useful.
To me, thank you.
Did you pick up that suggestion, yes?
That,
further questions? Yes, sir.
Another question, come with more of it. I mean, can I just say that in terms of, you know, all the difficulties that we have in terms of homelessness in Luton, that the housing department has really tried to do its best to try to improve and get people out of the hotels into some sort of residential apartment because of the children and the difficulty that they're going through. And I think, you know, we need to thank them for that. They're working very hard because demand in Luton is far too greater, and the impact of also in Luton is far greater. In terms of our good and outstanding school, we again, you know, congratulate especially the schools that are, you know, special schools who have done a fantastic job during the COVID by staying open when it was very difficult for them to continue. And they continued their service for the parents who would have found it very difficult had they not been open right through the period. So we are very grateful, and they need to be thanked for that. I also would say that we are very proud to have most good and outstanding schools in the eastern region, despite the deprivation and all the other factors that are in this town. So we need to be really, thank people, the teachers who have been working so hard to keep their standards high. Yes, we have a difficulty with some of our academies, but it's not as bad as when you look at overall in the country. The academies are far worse in terms of their performance compared to Mantan School when they were started off and they were given all that, golden handshake to become an academy, but it hasn't proved to be a success. So Mantan schools still, in my opinion, are performing nationally as well as locally far better than any. Overall, the performance of the council compared to our neighbours and compared to nationally, we're doing far better than most. And for that, we need to thank our workforce overall. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I just ask if the figure that's shown on page 61 is incorrect then? Because it shows in the column for the national figure percentage, it's showing at 95.3%. So is that figure wrong? Because we talked about 80 something and being us above their average, but the figure shown on page 61 talks about the national average being 95%. That's why I raised that question. I did give my congratulations, but my point was, are we actually trying to go, unless that figure's wrong?
I think we need to go back to that figure. I suspect that is not accurate, and I think it may be that it's need to challenge that. I'll check that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, I had a request from Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Chair. This is, again, a massive well done to the team working very hard. I'd also like to make a point of order, I suppose, is that we as members have a responsibility as public figures to use language carefully, particularly when describing our own town centre, and not saying that, the biggest deterrent is gangs, because we need to also make sure that it's factually correct and that we have data to back this up. Yes, we do have problems of, sometimes of antisocial behaviour, but we do have enforcement teams out. So I do think sometimes some of the language used is problematic and it can be dangerous, particularly when we hold office and positions of influence. And particularly when we look at the ethnographic figures of the type of people that do visit the town centre, I think it can be a particularly dangerous trip to group those people as gang members. Thank you.
Okay, in which case I think what the general consensus seems to be that we would like to congratulate the officers on the work that's been done, and that on the whole, it seems to be an excellent job. Just carry on, please, and do much more of the same. But yes, we very much appreciate the work that the officers have done, as portrayed in this report. So thank you, and that's it for this item. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, so we're now on to item 8. Sorry?
Clear. Asprey.
Asprey. We're on to item 8, and Claire, thank you very much. You'd like to present us with the report?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have an update, or really a complete refresh of a policy around shared ownership properties within the housing revenue accounts. And because this is possibly not something that people are very familiar with. My colleague Farhana, who's been really instrumental in drafting the policy, is going to take you through a quick presentation just to run you through the key parts of it. I hope that's useful for you.
Thank you, Claire. We've recently updated our policy and we are seeking the views from this board ahead of taking it to executive for approval. Our housing strategy includes a target to improve pathways for our residents to low-cost home ownership, and shared ownership is part of this. There are over 11,000 households on the housing waiting list, and of those, 70% are aged between 25 to 54. And Home Track data shows that the average price of a property in Luton is quite unaffordable. It's around £312,000, and the average price to income ratio is 6.67. So this makes it difficult for local people to get onto the property ladder. Therefore, shared ownership offers an affordable alternative. Next slide. Shared ownership.
Oh, sorry.
Shared ownership is an affordable way to get onto the property ladder. A person can purchase a percentage or a share of the property and pay rent on the remainder to an organisation such as a registered provider who owns the freehold. The occupier then can purchase additional shares known as staircasing until they own the whole property. However, they are under no obligation to staircase if they don't wish to. So we are in the process of updating our shared ownership policy. We have 18 shared ownership properties within the HRA, and we are currently on site with 7 at Buckle Close. And they will be our first new shared ownership homes for over 30 years. So this policy will apply to all shared ownership properties being built from 2024 onwards. This policy will not discriminate against any protected characteristics. However, we will be prioritising individuals with specific non-protected characteristics to increase their chances of purchasing a shared ownership property. At present, our shared ownership homes are not funded by Homes England. However, we are proposing that the council follows the same model lease requirements as set out in the Homes England Capital Funding Guide, whether the homes are funded by them or not, as it will mean a uniform approach regardless of funding, and also other providers are using the same model, so our policy will be in line with them. And the Capital Funding Guide sets out a range of criteria that this policy will adhere to, such as maximum household combined income should not be more than 80,000. You are unable to purchase a property on the open market. You are able to afford the purchase and keep up the repayments. A first-time buyer, unless exempt, as outlined in the policy, and be a British citizen, EEA national, or have indefinite leave to remain. And if you meet the criteria in the previous slide, then the order of prioritisation is serving military personnel or discharged within the last 2 years, or their partners of those who have died within the last 2 years. And they have to meet the Home England's criteria for military personnel to be eligible. Any applicant who's purchasing less than 50% share, any applicant assessed as being in housing need, all current council or housing association tenants, anyone on the council's housing register, local connection to where the development is situated, and closest match to family size against number of bedrooms. And slide 7 shows an example. So say the properties on the market value is 350,000. A person buys a 30% share, which equates to 105,000. They pay a deposit of 5,000, and then they will require a mortgage for 100,000. Their income is 31,000, and the income to mortgage ratio is 3.3. So the monthly mortgage outgoings would be 390, and the rent would be 449. So the total monthly housing cost would be 839, which is significantly less than renting privately. As you know, the rental prices of properties in Luton is like for a 2-bedroom is around £1,100. So if they were to get a shared ownership property, it would be more affordable, and also it's more secure than renting privately.
So marketing, previously the government supported home buy agents. However, that system ended last year and there's currently no replacement in place. So we intend to use our choice-based lettings register to promote our shared ownership properties to individuals. And we can also promote to staff within the council and our partners. And we would be able to market locally where homes have not been funded through Homes England. So we've had some feedback, and some of the questions were, what happens if a shared owner falls into arrears? Well, if they have a mortgage arrears, they would be at risk of repossession by the mortgage lender. And in the case of rent arrears, the council can apply for a possession order. However, eviction would always be the last resort. And can we prioritise our own key workers? Well, if the council is funding the whole scheme, then we have more flexibility for targeted marketing. Shared ownership homes, which are funded through Homes England, will have to follow their guidance on prioritisation and marketing. And can we set a lower income threshold than 80,000? This is a national maximum threshold outside of London, and households who are buying a smaller proportion of equity are given preference in the prioritisation criteria, and this supports lower income households. Any questions?
I'm a bit confused on this issue of staircasing. Looking at page 102, paragraph 11, Roman 4, says shared owners can staircase by a minimum of 1% in the first 15 years. Going over to page 106, at the top, the third bullet point down talks about allowing a purchase of an extra 1% of equity every year for the first 15 years. I mean, what are the rules? I assumed that the word minimum is what it really actually says. That these are the minimum amounts that shared owners can buy.
Yeah. So yes, previously the minimum staircasing I think was like chunks of 10%. But the new Homes England lease that was introduced nationally a couple of years ago introduced a new model for shared ownership. And there are a few things that are like substantially different in that. One of those is to allow a 1% per year staircasing for the first 15 years. So you can really minimally staircase by very small amounts, beyond which it goes to 5% chunks as a minimum chunk. If you get to year 3 and you want to staircase 25%, you can still do that. The point is you can the least you can do as a staircasing amount is 1% a year for the first 15 years and then 5% in chunks thereafter. I think in practice, it's probably unlikely that people will staircase 1% because actually there's legal fees and stuff around that probably make that a little bit unattractive. You'd be far better to wait a few years and then do like 10% at a time in practical terms. But anyway, it's in the lease. So that's the lease we're using. It was introduced as a national issue by the government. So that's gone into the National Homes England lease. I hope that's explained. So basically, you can staircase by any amount you like, broadly up to 100% over any time period. But if you want to do very tiny amounts, you can do very tiny amounts for the first 15 years and then 5% chunks thereafter. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. That is helpful.
Yeah, I think it's a brilliant initiative. I think it gives those people that have probably no chance of, getting up owning the property. And I think we've done that very small scale before, and it was successful. And I think if this is expanded, my other thoughts is that in terms of the key worker, that we ought to be giving them a priority. It was something that was thought about some time ago, but I don't think it came into practice. And I think this would be an ideal opportunity particularly those ones like the social workers and, and also in some of the people in the planning department, those that are difficult to recruit. And this will be an ideal thing for recruitment and retention part of it. And I think that should be really given a priority, and we should have done it sooner. But even now, I think it's a brilliant initiative, and we should do it as soon as possible, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Am I correct in did I correctly hear that this isn't funded by Homes England, or is?
So the scheme that we have on site right now isn't funded through Homes England.
Okay.
But where we're going to do more development in the future, we are expecting to start using Homes England funding. And if we are doing shared ownership on those schemes, at the moment we haven't got them in the mix, but it's a possibility. Okay. So really want to make sure that we are, well, there's a model lease available nationally that most housing associations and people who provide shared ownership are using. It seems sensible to us that we would use that lease because it's available nationally, everyone else is doing it, and we have a similar product to everybody else. And what it means is that where we are funded through Homes England, we will be contractually obliged to use that lease anyway. Okay. We didn't want to create a system whereby, well, if we're funding it, we'll use this lease, and if they're funding it, we'll use that. We want to have if we're going to start doing shared ownership, we want to do it in a coherent, the same way for all new developments, regardless of funding stream. So that's why we want to use the Homes England lease. It's there, everyone else is using it. Why reinvent the wheel? And we might want to use Homes England funding. The only stuff we have available that's being built now is not Homes England funded. So there are elements of that we wouldn't be contractually obliged to follow. But once we're in the legal lease space, then obviously the legal position is the same. But for things like some of the marketing and targeting, we do have a bit more flexibility if we're not funded through Homes England. And that's what we were trying to make the point in the policy.
That's fine. Thank you. The reason why I asked that was because of the types of properties that we'll be building potentially, because the default standard is set to change as of July last year. The government made an announcement that their default standard for homes would change to M42, which is accessible and adaptable. Will those properties be meeting those? Because Homes England will essentially have to start meeting those guidelines and those regulations. So are we set? Do we have to? Can we go beyond that guideline? Can we add that on? Or because obviously we don't have the funding for that. So is it potentially room to build M42 homes?
So in terms of the standard, if we're building to Homes England standards with Homes England funding, we'd have to meet their design criteria. And if that's flowed through, then that would apply anyway. We have a minimum design standard for council homes, which is pretty good in terms of accessibility in any case, because we want to do that anyway. So in terms of the accessibility, that would be more of a kind of design criteria rather than something specifically to do with the shared ownership approach, because we would apply that to all homes we're building regardless of tenure. So yeah, we have a design guide that we use for our own new schemes. For example, we're moving to net zero for all new council homes. That's part of our design guide. It's not required by any funder. It's a decision that we're making. And it's similar with the accessibility. We really look at accessibility as well. If it's flowed through from Homes England in relation to their funding as a contractual requirement, well, there will be a contractual requirement for that as well in terms of Homes England design requirements.
Thank you.
Yes, Chair. This seems like a very good scheme to give people an opportunity to own a home. I think fully support this. I do want to know, do we encourage staircasing?
Well, we don't have a lot of people to encourage at the moment, to be fair. We've got sort of 18 very historic shared ownership properties. I don't know whether any of those have particularly staircased through all that much. I can tell you that we have to make some assumptions about what levels of staircasing we might expect when we appraise a scheme, and I've been pretty cautious about it. One of the reasons for that is you don't want to make overly optimistic assumptions that, you know, oh, everyone will staircase to 100% within 10 years, because actually that distorts the financial picture when you're deciding on the viability of a scheme. But once we've got the new stuff in place, then we could send we can send an annual reminder saying, don't forget you can staircase. It brings more money in, it brings more capital in. Yeah. It swings and roundabouts, because we get less rent, because we get rent on the unsold equity. So it's kind of, you know, but we can certainly look at encouraging that, but we don't want to encourage people to overextend themselves. No, quite. It's got to be sustainable. And I think one of the things that I think is particularly attractive about shared ownership in Luton, or anywhere, frankly, is that it comes in cheaper than private renting, but much more secure. And you could buy your 30% share or whatever, and you could stick with that for the whole of the rest of your life. Yeah. You know, and it would be a much more stable environment if you wanted to stay in that home for a long time, and you would never be able to worry about being moved on, as long as you're covering all your costs. It's a personal decision. If someone wants to staircase and build more equity, that you know, that's a financial decision for the individuals.
Page 108. When we look at the Home England's criteria, the number one thing that seemed to be shown was serving military personnel, those discharged in the last 2 years, surviving partners, military personnel. When we go down to the next bit, though, whilst the government has removed any requirement to prioritise any other group, the council prioritise applicants in the following order. Serving military personnel aren't included.
Would you like us to recommend putting that back in? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a useful observation. I think for us, you know, where we've prioritised there is about saying, if we can prioritise people who are currently social housing residents, we're freeing up a home for somebody else. So for us, that's probably a higher priority, because we want to make the best use of the homes that are available. So that's kind of where we've been looking, but it's certainly something that we could take back for consideration. I know we've signed up to the kind of military standard. Yeah, I mean, and that's our starting point anyway, is the national criteria. So yeah.
Just come in on that. I understand, and I think you're right, that we are potentially putting ourselves at risk going forward if we don't include that in the list. I agree with what Councillor Sam was saying earlier, that the fact that key workers now appears in our list is a critical one, especially for social workers. One question from me, and I'm afraid it's going back onto the mechanics, I'm afraid. I didn't really understand from the report what happens if you've got somebody who's taken up this offer and they want to sell up and move. I didn't really understand from the report what position they put themselves in if they do that.
Yeah, so shared owners are free to move on and sell their share. There's a period of time, I think it's 4 weeks, that we have to nominate a potential purchaser for that share. And if we don't manage to find someone, then they can sell that share on the open market. The other option we might have is to buy back the entire property and then resell a share to a new applicant. At the moment, because we haven't really had anything much in this space, we don't have much in the way of a kind of clear waiting list, or, you know, we're starting from scratch. So if we've got more volume coming through, I think we'll be able to be in a better position to start saying, well, we know there's people here who have expressed an interest, who we can refer when something becomes available. And secondhand shared ownership is a thing you see in the market. It's fairly niche, but you can scan Rightmove and find people selling their secondhand shared ownership shares in the open market, and they have a right to do that.
Yes.
Hello, good evening. Yes, my question, I'm referring to page number 108, government priorities group, following order. Last point is residents living outside of Luton. So means like, are we encouraging outsider to join shared ownership by properties in Luton? Is there any, because what I've seen in some other council, they have some sort of requirement. Presidents must have to live within the council within 3 years, some sort of, to give them proof to get eligibility, because this will encourage these other outsider people to come and, and buy, use these shared ownership facilities. That will not benefit it for local residents or people who are on the waiting list. So I would like to request if you can revisit these requirements and make it people only for those who are lives in Luton in certain time.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to clarify that. So you'll notice that residents living outside of Luton are at the absolute bottom of that list, and they come after anyone else who's from Luton, people on the register, key workers, literally all the other people that we would prefer. So it's basically, if we've got properties that we've built and we're expecting to sell them, we also don't want them to sit empty. And if literally nobody wanted them and we couldn't sell them to anybody else, then that's the point when we would consider someone from outside of Luton, because there's a limit to how long you can leave something sat vacant. I think it's highly unlikely that that's going to happen, because of the information we've had from other housing associations and providers who've done shared ownership in Luton has been indicating that actually most of those sales are local. So they're quite often to local people. So yeah, we could take it off, but actually at the end of the day, we've got to sell those homes to somebody if they're available for sale. And then if literally nobody else was coming forward to buy those properties, there's a point at which we would have to make a sale. And if we're selling to someone in housing need and they just happen to be over the border, so be it. But realistically, I don't think that's going to happen, because we're going to have plenty of offers already for the small amount of homes that we're going to do. I'm confident we're going to fill those with people who are currently on our waiting list or in our accommodation or working for us or whatever. I think all of those, and anyone else from Luton is already ahead of the list. So I think really it's an absolute last stop resort.
There are a lot of working class people who lives in London. They try to relocate outside outside of M25 to find a cheaper option. So obviously, in terms of financial eligibility, they will be ahead compared to local residents' income. So of course, that will create pressure on your requirement to get their eligibility. So of course, you have to be careful. In case if you are not able to sell, you can put on the council stock. So you need to have a alternate solution in case if those other previous groups are not eligible or unable to buy, you need to put some sort of alternative pathway rather than offering to outsider. Thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, I mean, I take your point. I'll just come back on the issue about people from outside of Luton outpricing local residents. I think the thing to be aware of is that there is a criteria that prioritise people who are buying lower shares and shares under 50%. And the way that the assessment goes means that you assess the ability of the household to buy a first tranche share. And if it's a better off household and they could afford, say, 50%, 60% share, actually someone who can only afford a 30% share would actually get priority under the criteria around prioritising those who have lower shares. So it's actually giving a better opportunity for households on lower incomes, as long as those incomes can buy a share and is sustainable. So that we shouldn't be in a position where people who are coming in with very high incomes are buying in. And in any case, to be honest, people who have got much higher incomes can probably, certainly up to the 80%, £80,000 limit, they could probably just buy in the open market in Luton and they wouldn't be eligible for shared ownership anyway. So I think that the thing about prioritising people who have the lower first tranche shares means that it supports people who are on lower household incomes to access it over people who have higher incomes. Does that help?
Thank you.
Are we happy with the recommendation here, that we want to support and recommend this policy for adoption? Everybody happy that we do that?
Chair, can I just clarify whether you want me to put a line in about serving military personnel into our local criteria?
I think we have to be advised by you, but if we were to put that in, but to put it fairly low on our list would be my suggestion.
Okay, what if I put it after Luton residents and before the residents outside of the town?
Can you repeat that again, please?
Yeah, sure. If I put in a line around military personnel and the criteria around that, and I put it in underneath all other Luton residents and ahead of people from outside Luton.
Yes.
So of all the people outside Luton, we prioritise military people, basically. Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Hey, thank you very much. As far as I can see, it's a very welcome initiative. Thank you very much. Okay, item 9 then, work programme. I'm going to largely hand over to Eunice at this point.
So, Chair, if I can just refer members to page 127 of the agenda, that proposed additional meeting. We were considering an additional meeting to receive a report regarding the waste disposal contract award. I've had a conversation with the chair. It seemed to be more relevant to Finance Review Group. In the meantime, though, that item was meant to be submitted to executive meeting on the 22nd of April 2024, but that date has been moved forward to June. I think, Chair, you will be having conversation with Sean Askins about the way forward for this. Thank you.
I'm proposed to Eunice when we discussed this that this was talking very specifically about the new contract to replace the current contract that we have for waste disposal. And it seemed to me, since that was going to be almost entirely financial issues to do with contract and terms and conditions, that it was more appropriate to FRG than to OSB. Does anybody think that that's a wrong judgment, or is that fair, do you think, to refer it to FRG? Okay, so in which case then we'll do that. I'll discuss that with Sean to make sure that he's happy as well, but it does seem more logical.
Yes, Chair, in which case that proposed additional meeting will be removed from the agenda of the committee.
Okay. For that, which leaves us then with the original item, where we had 2 declarations of interest. So 2 people get to escape.
Chair, can I just ask?
Yes,
on page
just 1 second,
125,
Councillor.
If we were removing that other item to go to the finance, should we not put in its place that draft proposal for the underground bid and pilot scheme? It's not there anymore for the 26th of September. Gives opportunity to Sean Atkins to put it there to replace that one that we're removing?
I'm happy to discuss that with Sean when I talk to him, but I don't think at this point we should be considering an additional meeting, which is what was originally proposed here. I'm trying to avoid adding in an extra OSB if I can.
No, I was suggesting the one that already exists. We moved an item out, so maybe we could put that in one of the items in its place. That's what I'm suggesting.
I will address that with Sean Askins when I see him.
Thank you. Good luck. Sorry.
So back onto item 6.
That's correct. It's okay.
Okay. Yeah. Right, back onto item 6. Now, just to make sure that everybody's at the same point, this item has been going to and fro between OSB and executive like a game of ping pong. It's become somewhat ludicrous, at least in my view. What executive are asking us to do is we had sent a report to executive essentially concerning the level of responses from residents in order to make a valid decision on the parking scheme that's here. The critical thing, I believe, is that there is a subsequent extension which is also being researched, where it looks as if the response is lower still from the residents. We already have a paid parking scheme in parts of the town, and there was proposals as to whether or not this scheme should be chargeable or not. So the whole thing has become very, very confused. What executive are asking us to do is to implement the fact that a 30 to 40% return rate can be considered as providing a reasonable figure for decision making. Nationally, it's normally considered that a 32 to 35% level is acceptable for making a decision. The second part is that executive are saying if the 10 till 12 restriction is to be applied, then residents need to understand that, and we need to understand that there will be regular patrols. But the other critical item is that executive are asking us to say, as there would be costs involved in doing more of the surveying work of residents, how it was going to be paid for. What's the view of the board on these recommendations that have come through from the executive?
I have a proposal, if you'd allow me to circulate it, Chair. Right, would you like me? I formally move it, and in doing so, I have to remind members that the proposals that we've put forward several times before would lead to no cost falling on the council, because the two airport companies make very large profits from the activities that cause this parking misery for the residents, and there's no earthly reason why they shouldn't be expected to pay for it. But the key to this that I'm moving is that executive is asking us to identify cuts that can be made without telling us how much those cuts need to amount to. I don't see how you can possibly point to savings that can be made somewhere in the budget without a clear indication as to how much saving you're looking for. So if they want us to identify savings, they better come up with a figure and tell us how much they want us to save.
What we just had circulated is saying specifically that executive be advised that OSB rejects the executive's request on the basis that executive have not provided OSB with the costs that they understand would be involved to fund the proposal set out in the report. OSB nevertheless understands that the executive's decision to support these proposals is predicated on identifying sources of funding, and therefore recommends that the executive request officers to prepare a costed financial report that also provides an indication of the sources of finance. What's the view of board members? We need to get to the point where this whole matter is resolved. Yes, Councillor.
Yeah, just I'm a little bit confused, to be honest with you, because I haven't been involved in it. But what I need to understand it, the cost of, if I were to understand, the executive is saying the usage at bridge services to be cut to make this saving. Is that what I understand it to be?
I'm not suggesting that cuts should be made at all. And what I'm proposing here isn't suggesting that cuts should be made. What I'm saying is the executive is suggesting that cuts may be necessary in order to pay for the scheme, but they're not saying the extent of the cuts and how much the scheme is going to cost. We need figures.
And who is going to subsidize it? Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about subsidizing this scheme?
There's nothing in what I'm proposing here that talks about subsidy.
No.
I interpreted what they sent back as to be referring to the recommendations in terms of consultations. Yeah, which was what on the night of the discussion officers told us was not affordable. It was the recommendations in terms of consultations, and that's what they're talking about, not the scheme as in the parking scheme.
Any comments on that?
I've moved it. I guess you need to vote on it, Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
Yes, Chair. Going back and forth on this, well, obviously, straight away, I think we're definitely going to reject this proposal because it's different than the executives have talked about, and this is talking about something different as well. So I'm going to reject the proposal anyway, and I hope my colleagues too as well.
I think I agree with my colleague, Councillor Ajisola. I think what this proposal is completely different to what the recommendations are. So is it possible that we can reject this and carry on and vote whether we, move this, the one we have in front of us, rather than the new proposal that's been come in?
Can I ask then if we can to do a vote on whether or not the proposal that's been put forward by Councillor Franks is to be sent. So can I ask who's in favour of sending it? But only on, because I also share a degree of question, and the reason I was hesitant was I feel that by putting this forward, we will continue the ping pong game between executive and this board. However, I'm going to vote for the proposal. So
Is chair is going to be aye. So I'm not in this situation.
So I get 2 votes. Yes, unfortunately I do. That's the way it works, I'm afraid, Councillor. And so I'm going to say yes, I will vote for, though I do think we have a danger that this will then end up coming back yet again. But in which case, when it comes back, I think I would like to say that we need to somehow get to executive to make sure that there is clarity on exactly what is to be funded, not just the amount. Thank you. That's then, I think, the end of the meeting. So thank you very much indeed. It's carried. But thank you very much indeed for attending the meeting this evening. I'm glad we didn't all freeze to death tonight. It was, somebody had flicked a switch somewhere. I agree with you. I could tell by the gloves, I saw them come out.